people that are overcome with a lot of shame numb out. They can't find any emotion. You can't just selectively numb one. You numb your life experience. Identifying the difference is a powerful step toward healthier relationships and a healthier self. Guilt is corrective. Shame is corrosive. Guilt connects. Shame disconnects. Have you ever longed to be able to talk about values and morals or faith and spirituality without feeling judged? Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Mindful Moments, Insights to Empower the Soul. This podcast will empower you to embrace your true self.
Hi, I'm Sharilyn Green, and I'm a marriage and family therapist and honestly passionate about families and relationships.
And I'm Dr. Debi Gilmore. It's so good to be with you again. Today, we're going to talk about two terms that we hear a lot about. In fact, we hear them together. People will say shame and guilt. Today, we're going to separate it. I'm going to suggest that we say shame or guilt. I want you to think of a recent moment. Think of a time when you messed up, big or small, doesn't matter. Maybe it was a time when you made a serious mistake and you realized you were in a big mess and it's all because of something you did or said. Now, come up with whatever that is, or even just make something up. Consider these two quick questions. In that moment, did you withdraw or hide, telling yourself you're such a fool and this just verifies you have no credibility? Or did you feel a motivation to move toward doing something about it, like acknowledging your humanness, owning the mistake, and seeking repair? Now, the difference between these two considerations is the experience of either shame or guilt.
Yeah, and so what's interesting about this is that although people use these words interchangeably, they have actually really different effects on our relationships, our communication, and especially our sense of self. So we're hoping by the end of this podcast that you'll be able to tell the difference between these two and use this to strengthen your understanding about these two words. So as you were talking, Debbie, I was thinking, when's the last time I embarrassed myself and what I did? And probably, it's such a natural instinct to just run and hide. I can think of a lot of situations where that's my natural instinct, and times when I've done that and thought, I've messed up, I'm a failure. Somebody else would have done that so much better. The words that we use for ourselves, right? I'm an idiot, all kinds of terrible things that we say to ourselves when something like this happens. So you've got me thinking about my own responses to the times when I've done this.
Yeah. Well, I'm always reminded of that moment. Maybe you're in a classroom setting and the professor or discussion leader asks a question and you spontaneously raise your hand and they call on you. You make a comment and you spend the next 20 minutes to half hour just humiliated about what you said, questioning that. And that's just so sad. And then someone will come up to you afterwards and say, I love when you make comments. So this shaming and painful judgmental evaluation of self really is targeted toward our value as a person or our overall worth. It is a moment of shame that says, I am just plain bad. There is a distinction between shame and guilt that's important for us to understand so that when it happens, when shame shows up, you can say, okay, wait a sec, this is unhealthy. So guilt is the overall sense that I did something wrong. It's about behavior. Shame is that haunting voice in our head that says, I am something wrong. Guilt targets behavior. Shame targets the value or view of self. So let's imagine you're in a heated conversation. Here's a little different scenario. You're with your dear friend or loved one, and as the tension rises, you end up snapping at them and saying something you instantly regret. Now, if you feel guilt, you might tell yourself, oh boy, I shouldn't have spoken that way. I need to apologize and let them know I regret what I said and regret hurting their feelings. I would be wise to just let them know I need a minute to calm down. Now, I want you to notice apologies aren't just I'm sorry. A really sweet and gentle apology is I regret what I said.
I love that. And if we feel guilt, we'll say something to ourselves like, well, this isn't like me. I'm really not an insensitive or hurtful person. And guilt can actually become a motivator for change. It's a check in with our core values, right? And who we are and how we see ourselves. And it actually helps us move towards the person with responsibility and repair. If we feel shame, we start to think, wow, see, this confirms it. I am such a terrible person. I always mess up. I hurt other people. This is just who I am. I might as well give up right now. I'll never get this right. And so when we respond to things with shame, we automatically want to go hide, to shut down, or actually pull away from connection.
That's the distinction that I hope that people can feel, is the difference between wanting to rise up and do something about it versus wanting to run and hide. Shame makes us want to shrink. And Sharilyn, you mentioned core values. One important core value we should all have is value of self. There needs to be some level of appreciation for self. Shame happens so quickly that we might not recognize the damage to our confidence. Another important difference between shame and guilt is the temporary nature of when we make a mistake and the sense of permanency of the shame. Guilt is about a moment in time with the opportunity to repair. Our value goes with us throughout the entire process, but shame is about our identity and who we really are. Shame suggests that we're doomed because we're just plain bad. The first step toward change, we say this a lot, is awareness. Awareness of this process really is a giant leap toward conquering it. You can do a self-assessment. I like to give people the direction test. In this moment, when you wonder, is this shame or guilt? You can ask yourself, where is my emotion pushing me right now? A sense of guilt will cause us to want to lean toward repair. We might feel inclined to apologize, to seek clarification, like, wait, did I misunderstand? Can we have a try on this again? Or learn more about what caused us to err. This moment of pondering and self-reflection and self-assessment often reveals insight and a greater self-awareness, which is a really healthy state when we have the confidence to be able to look within. Maybe we're tired, maybe we're overwhelmed or not in tune or sensitive to the other person's situation. That happens so much. Or maybe we just need to slow down and exercise patience with others and with ourselves. So shame causes us to want to go away from connection. Shame suggests that we should shrink from embarrassment or humiliation, to hide, to withdraw, or attack ourselves and others.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the cycle of this. When we respond with shame, the more shame that comes. When we can repair things, as you talked about, with a healthy level of guilt, that has its own positive cycle. I'm thinking as you talk about this, how interesting it is, the cycles that emerge when we do this. And we know that the distinction between the two is actually a powerful physical and emotional experience. You can actually feel the difference in your body immediately. And when, you frame it that way, you can kind of sort out what's happening. So examples of this would be you forgot maybe a good friend's birthday. And the guilt response would be, I'll reach out and I'll make it right. A shame response would be, I am such a terrible friend.
Oh, that's so hard. Oh, forgetting a friend's birthday, we might tell ourselves, shame on me, but humans forget. And we hope that we offer grace to others that forget, but grace to ourselves. Here's another example. You lose your temper with a friend, a loved one, or a business associate. This happens in all settings, really. A guilt response would be an immediate, I really need to own that. A shame response would be, see, this just confirms there's something wrong with me. I am flawed. Or another example, is there anybody out there that hasn't been late for an important deadline? A guilt response would be, oops, I mismanaged my time. I know that I can do better, so I will own this mistake and plan better next time. But a shame response might be, I am just plain incompetent. I give up. Here's another one that really attacks our core values. I will try to cover this up or explain myself. Otherwise, I'll never achieve that promotion. Or another one, I am unworthy of love. I am incapable of doing anything right.
Well, even as you say those words, that breaks my heart, that we would say those things. Sue Johnson, the other day, I was listening to some things that she wrote about shame, and she says shame is one of the loneliest, most painful experiences you could have. And then she said this with such compassion, no wonder we do so much to avoid it. I love that. And I'm just thinking as you're talking about how painful it is to feel shame. So, just to reiterate, the difference in each of these examples you've just mentioned, Debbie, is that guilt is a temporary situation, but shame suggests utter failure. And actually, you feel like you can't even correct. You have an inability to correct the error. Some of these shame thoughts that come on, these are even painful to say, is things like, I always ruin things, or I'm a terrible parent, I'm not enough.
Aren't those familiar? We hear those all the time. In fact, I've probably said those things in my lifetime. Shame is paralyzing. It really holds us in place without the ability to move in a positive direction. Let's shift to some examples of guilt thoughts. Like, I raised my voice and I want to and know that I can handle it better. Did you notice how I put that in there? I want to handle it better and I know that I can. I have enough value for self that I see this is not who I am. Or I missed something important. I will do what's necessary to make it right. I'll do something about it. Now, I love metaphors and analogies. And there's a good one to be able to determine the difference between shame and guilt. And this metaphor is the brick versus the backpack. So, one way to describe the difference is imagine you're walking along a road and you have a wheelbarrow of bricks. Now, you get a bit careless and one brick falls out of your wheelbarrow. You know the size of the brick could cause damage to any car or a vehicle that comes along and doesn't see it and hits it. Although you were careless, you decide to remedy the situation. You stop, you pick it up, and you put it back where it belongs with the rest of your stack of bricks. Your task is complete. And just like you said, Sharilyn, it's temporary. You get back on your journey, you deliver the load. In fact, you forget it ever happened because you remedied the situation swiftly. This is like guilt. Once that repair has been made, it isn't useful to dwell on it anymore.
So then shame can feel like a backpack, and we carry that backpack wherever we go. And it contains a lot of things that we don't need, but things that we feel actually compelled to carry. And we tell ourselves that we don't deserve actually to lighten the load. So it weighs us down, it slows our pace, and becomes a really heavy part of you. And so sometimes we can just assume that the weight is me. It's, this is me, and I'll always have to carry this weight. It's my responsibility to carry this weight. I just want to add one thing when you're talking to Debbie. It's such a beautiful experience when someone does apologize, when they feel that healthy guilt and repair. I have so much admiration for someone that will come to me and say, hey, I didn't handle that well. Can I tell you that? And I'm going to try again. I was just thinking it's so good for us, but it's also good for the people that hear us do that. The modeling of that, it's just powerful. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I like to say that can be a bonding moment. My respect goes sky high for someone that has the confidence to be able to do that. And if you think about doing that in a couple relationship, particularly, and for parents, for your children to see you repair and say, give that regret and, oh, I'm so sad that I hurt you. Now, let's talk about guilt as an adaptive emotion. It actually really is a skill that we build. Guilt supports and upholds our core values, as we talked earlier, and moral behavior. So guilt serves as a motivation. You said this earlier, Sharilyn. It's a motivation to repair whatever has been broken. And it serves as a motivator to repair a relationship that might have suffered a hurt or an injury, which is an extreme rupture in the relationship. So interestingly, once the repair has happened, anxiety tends to lessen and might even disappear. Our emotions are regulated by the experience of guilt. Think about it. The action of doing something about it, repairing something, and moving forward. Guilt pushes us to do something about an error, and our emotions are regulated, softened, calmed by our action to take care of it.
Yeah. And so the opposite of that, the shame, it's actually a disorganizing emotion. And so when we're overcome with shame, we start to feel all kinds of triggers that create emotional reactions in us that actually drive us to want to fight, to run away, or even sometimes to just simply freeze in place. We know, especially as therapists, Debbie, that shame is often linked to attachment wounds or early criticism from caregivers. And I just want to pause on that because I guess I try really hard to help clients who suffer with shame to understand that it's really a survival mechanism that they've had to develop. Instead of feeling like they're a bad person, I try to honor that they're not bad. They've actually done a great job of surviving in the best way that they knew they could. And so it's such an interesting emotion. I'm so glad we're talking about it. When we make mistakes and experience harsh discipline or criticism, especially from our caregivers, we internalize that feedback. And like we've said so many times, we believe that we're just plain bad. And so the heartbreaking part is that shame disrupts relationships, causing insecurity and a low view of self and actually of others. It's interesting. It doesn't just create a low view of ourselves. It creates that kind of view of others, which can be so damaging and disorganizing.
That's so true. And just as you were talking, I was thinking about what is the fuel for shame? It's typically us comparing ourselves to someone else, taking our weakness and looking at what they do really well and saying, I'm not enough. Shame is fueled by looking out and seeing that we're not measuring up. Guilt can be fueled by, this is what I was yesterday. I'm better today. I want to do better. Or even choosing a mentor that can guide us and help us and looking how they do things and saying, I want to acquire that skill. Meaning, I'm not there yet, but I sure would love to develop that. So remember, shame is comparison. Guilt is looking at ways to progress and become better. So here's some simple ways to shift from shame to guilt. And I'm going to guess that the majority of people out there, this idea of shame is resonating with us. We all understand it. We felt it. So one way to manage the feelings of shame is to reframe a shame moment as a guilt moment. It's powerful. Telling yourself something like, what if I think about this as more about what I did, not who I am? So here's a little experiential exercise. Again, try to think of a moment when you made a mistake, you hurt someone. So the first step really is to write the first thought that you have about yourself and the person that you hurt. Write it down. If you write it, it's more experiential. Don't just think it, write it down. And then determine, is this thought guilt or shame? And notice I suggested what's the thought you tell about yourself and what's the thought you're telling yourself about them. So if it's shame, rewrite it as guilt. Try to rewrite, I'm a failure, and instead write, oops, I missed a step, and I can and will fix that next time or right now. And then reflect on the contrast as to how your body feels. This is really important, that affect bridge, when you view it as shame and then when you view it as guilt.
What I love about this is you're actually slowing down the process. You said earlier, how quickly and unconsciously almost we jump to these different experiences. And so I love this process of just slowing it down, writing it down, thinking about it. That's so powerful. So another way, Debbie, that you can evaluate if you're driven by guilt or shame is to try some of these things too. So think of a moment when you felt guilt and then notice where the emotion or sensation is in your body. And you'll notice that if it's guilt, it's felt as a tight chest or kind of a compelling desire to act or repair. So guilt, that's often what it feels like. If you're experiencing a shame moment, then notice the emotion or sensation in your body. And it will have a feeling of heaviness that makes you, again, just want to hide or shrink or collapse. So this is another kind of check-in. Which direction am I going? Am I headed to guilt or to shame? And it can serve as an aha moment often with our clients. We do this a lot. Where is it in your body? What does it feel like? And so this shift from viewing yourself as a failure to viewing it as something repairable and something that you can move past. It's not just powerful, it's so hopeful. I've seen that so many times, the hope of, wow, I could see this differently. I could feel differently. This could be fixable. It's an exciting shift that you're talking about.
Yes, it's a whole experience. When you connect the emotion, the experience, the thoughts with your body, you really will notice the difference. A sick feeling in the pit of your stomach versus just this tightness of, uh-oh, in your heart, symbolically. That's kind of what you're talking about. Another way to explore the differences is to imagine any one of these scenarios, a moment when you snapped at your partner, a day you missed a work deadline, the moment you realized you forgot an important date like an anniversary or birthday, or the time you realized you broke a boundary set by someone you care about, you stepped over that and infringed on that, or the time when you accidentally embarrassed someone. Bottom line, guilt says, oops, I did something wrong. I made a mistake. I am human and I will correct it. Shame says, I am something wrong. I am a mistake.
Yeah. Unfortunately, shame interferes in our relationships. It can be virtually impossible, actually, to repair a relationship when we're driven by shame. Because when we're driven by shame, let me explain the why. We actually tend to work to please others so they won't be disappointed in us. And that creates an ultimate betrayal of ourselves. So when a repair is needed in a relationship, only feelings of guilt can be productive. If we're convinced that we're just plain bad or not worthy of love and connection, it's impossible to turn around fully and make a repair and seek forgiveness and move on without dwelling on the mistake. This is just such an important concept, I think, is to understand the way shame impacts our relationships. It leads to defensiveness, to criticism, to ultimate withdrawal. And instead, it's interesting, the response often to these deep feelings of shame are to attack or stonewall or overmanage, even control deeply painful, embarrassing emotions, or even people around us. And so it's important to understand the impact of shame on relationships. So in relationships, guilt, again, will lead to a willingness to own the mistake, to seek repairs, and to lean into the relationship with more intimacy and strengthening behaviors. And so some things to think about as you consider, how shame may be impacting relationships is to ask, what's an insight I'm leaving with, and what thing am I going to practice?
Yeah, that's the action. That's the I can do better and I am better than what I'm telling myself when I'm in shame. Overall, guilt is corrective, shame is corrosive. The two C's. Guilt connects, shame disconnects. So, guilt shame being corrosive. I mentioned this earlier, paralysis. It just causes us to freeze in place. And what we do see in our work a lot is people that are overcome with a lot of shame numb out. They can't find any emotion. You can't just selectively numb one. You numb your life experience. Everything that you experience is surface only. So identifying the difference is a powerful step toward healthier relationships and a healthier self. So, we're going to shift gears because not only do we experience shame, but do we shame others? I am certain that there are often times when we do and we don't realize it. So, we want to talk about first how to recognize it and how to stop. We've spent a lot of time talking about the experience personally of shame. Sometimes we do offer that to others or impose it on others. So when we become irritated, judgmental, overwhelmed, or assume a sense of being superior, and maybe we don't even recognize when we're doing that. I'm in charge. Or sometimes when we feel sadness, fear, or helplessness, and we don't want to appear weak, we might mask it by attacking someone and turning the focus on them. It matters because when we cause shame, we distance ourselves from others. They will pull away because those are feelings that they also can't tolerate.
Hey everyone, this is the producer of Debi and Sharilyn's podcast. I'm coming on to let you know two things. First, this is a part 1 episode, so we want to make sure you tune in next week to hear the other side of shame, where you will learn to replace shaming others with curiosity and connection. It's actually a really good episode. It helped me in my own relationship this week. And the second thing we wanted to say, we have a major announcement happening very soon. This will impact your listening of this podcast, so make sure you're following Debi and Sharilyn on Facebook and or Instagram so that you can get the big update when it comes. With that, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We really appreciate your support. Please send Sharilyn and Debi discussion ideas to help make this podcast as enriching for you as possible. We'll see you next week for part 2.